have the queer subject, which is a queer embodiment, whether it's queer gender or queer sexuality or a queer politic and how that affects your person and way of living in the world, whether it's in any way going counter the socio-cultural norms of your community. We're talking about alternate kinship communities, alternative families, alternative ways of living that go counter to monogamous marriage and things like that, right? So those are the ways that we're talking about queerness as an embodied lived experience and people who identify with queerness in that way. And then we have a queer lens, right? A queer framework with which to look at other paradigmatic systems that we live in and through. So this could be queer temporality or queer ecology or queer failure, queer futurity, right? Ways of looking at the structures of society differently, to challenge and look critically at the systems that we might otherwise take for granted.
So our book, Queering Italian Media, looks at these complexities within the term, and it also looks at the complexities of the other key terms in our title. Of course, those are Italian and media. Those terms are also quite fraught and have a lot of different possible understandings. Today, we're focusing on the queer part of Queering Italian Media, because the other terms are circulating throughout the sessions of this summer school, but they are just as porous, and I think they deserve the same kind of rigorous interrogation. So what you have here is the table of contents, just to give you a sense of the broad types of understandings of these terms that are circulating in our book. We're going to focus today on 3 of these chapters: the one that Julia wrote, the one that I wrote, and the one that Dom wrote. So Dom, if you're listening and you want to interject at any point, you're welcome to.
So embarrassing.
But just to sort of give you a quick outline of what we're going to talk about today, we're going to start by focusing on Julia's chapter, Queer Italian Communities and Alternative Televisual Remediations, where discourse theory is deployed to think about the queer subject in web series and in televisual remediations, paying attention to the mutually constitutive relationships between viewer, consumer, and producer. And then we'll focus on Dom's chapter, the queer potential of mainstream film, where queer theory is used to analyze texts that aren't necessarily immediately read or understood as queer. So specifically, Holdaway shows us a way of looking at mainstream film and the ways queer figures, and I'm using air quotes there, even though you can't see, the way queer figures are used to reaffirm certain national norms as part of a process of normalization in the service of a neoliberal ideology. And then finally, we'll conclude with my chapter, A Queer Road, Crossing Borders on and off the Screen in Corazones de Mujer. Here, queer theory is used to look at queer subjects, so all of the queer things coming together. But specifically, we're looking at it in the context of indie cinema and the representation of queer possibility in dialogue with queer narratives about nomadism and current immigration, as a way of hopefully ending on something of an optimistic note.